Good afternoon, everyone. One of the speakers who will deliver welcoming remarks is on a tight schedule, so we'll start pretty much on time here. I'd like to welcome you all on behalf of Dr. Anna Damascu of Transparency International Greece to our joint production and event entitled Gatekeepers of Democracy, Think Tanks, NGOs, and Civil Society from Thought to Action. I bear the regrets of the president of American College, Dukakis, and the provost of my college, the American College of Thessaloniki, who were unable to attend today, but we're fortunate that one of the members of the governance committee of the American College of Thessaloniki, Dr. Dukakis is here, and he would say a word or two of welcome to you on behalf of everyone at ACT. Dimitri, please.
Hi everybody, I'm Michael. I'm professor here in Athens, and these days I'm running for office for the European parliamentary elections in less than 2 weeks' time. But I'm particularly happy to join you here in this beautiful evening together with my friend David, and say a warm welcome on behalf of ACT and its work to all of you. ACT is a fine academic institution based in Thessaloniki that started its life more than 20 years ago, and shows the way for an education of excellence and extroversion, and what Greece can achieve if the legal framework and the political framework were more permissive. Unfortunately, here we are in 2019, and we are still trying to confirm the self-evident, because in this country there is nothing self-evident, and we kind of continuously reinvent the wheel. So ACT is, and I'm very, very proud to be part of the work that you, the faculty, basically, is doing there. And I wish we can have more of this kind of initiatives up north, and turn Greece into an international academic center. We have the potential, we have the great scientists in the diaspora and here in Greece, and we can do it, and I hope we will, sooner rather than later. Now, the topic is emblematic. It's a topic that we're going to discuss with fine thinkers that I know very well, some of them, and that has occupied the discussion about democracy for the last at least 50 years. And more so today, that we see a certain regression of democracy in certain parts of the world. It's obvious that democracy is not simply elections, as some autocrats might wish us to believe. And I'm referring to things happening in the Balkans, in Turkey, in Russia, and in other places. And it is true that civil society is the gatekeeper and should play that role of gatekeeping for the benefit of a mature, advanced, well-entrenched, consolidated, I can use so many adjectives, democracy. not everything is fine with NGOs. There is this discussion as well about NGOs playing a role contrary to the deepening of democracy, and we've seen such roles in places like Eastern Europe. But overall, for sure, it's a partner and a great instrument in that regard. We live in very interesting times where there is this populist challenge all over Eastern Europe and in other places as well, and who we are to speak, since we were kind of a paramount playground of this populist challenge a few years ago, and we still have a long battle to wage, and this is the battle I have been giving myself personally the last 5 years on television and now in the active politics, because I believe that the populists rely either on the left or on the right on the same basis of irrationalism, fake news, conspiracy theories, polarizing the people between the elites and real people, and so on and so forth. I mean, the repertoire is more or less similar. Here we are on the eve of our elections, and we have this fine, great collection of panelists to speak about that. Unfortunately, I will have to run because I have to go to another TV studio to give another interview. But I'm sure I'm going to watch the video. And David, congratulations for your fine work. It's always great to have you here in Athens. And my colleagues from Macedonia, from the Aeneas, and of course from the primary organizer here, the Transparency. Take good care, and all the very best to everybody.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome all. This is the third event in the last 18 months that Transparency International co-organizes with ACT, and the second with the Dukakis Center in particular. We're thus grateful to ACT as a whole, which always endorses and supports the work of Transparency International in the most appropriate way. The event of today, however, was an idea of Professor Wisner, which Transparency International immediately endorsed, as we're not only think tank / NGO, and I will explain later what I mean, but since a long time we have been promoting with specific proposals the strengthening of the Greek civil society, so that the latter can perform its tasks as gatekeeper of democracy in the most effective way. In light of the upcoming Euro elections, as well as Greek regional and national elections, which will take place in the course of 2019, the event of today, with the strong symbolism of the Hellenic Parliament in our background, is expected to yield significant input with the contribution of our distinguished speakers, all of whom I can assure you are themselves gatekeepers, both in their professional and personal capacities. So thank you all, and looking forward.
Thank you, Anna. I'll say just a brief word about the Dukakis Center. We have been working in Thessaloniki for 20 years, and I think for most Athenians, that's 20 years under the radar. So what are we? We started life as an endowed chair based in the undergraduate program of international relations at the American College of Thessaloniki, ACT. And in 2011, we saw that the original purpose of the chair wasn't really suitable for the environment, for the kinds of activities we were undertaking, for the outreach we would want to do. So we transformed the chair into a full-fledged university center. It's hard for me to say exactly what we are in terms of the organizations that are present today. We're a university hub, in the sense that it's our primary stakeholders are young people at universities, at ACT or at the public universities in Thessaloniki. And our principal mission is to inspire an interest in public service and civic engagement. we're accompanied by 3 of the interns up at the Dukakis Center, and if you would just stand up for a moment here. These are the kinds of people who will be making decisions for Greece, for the United States, for Northern Macedonia in the years to come, and they're the kinds of young people that we work with principally. We're also a forum in the sense that we undertake our public service initiatives in the form of events like this, where we can bring together a very diverse audience, a group of people who may or may not actually interface with one another typically, and we can approach subjects that might be difficult in other venues and other circumstances, and try to add something to the public debate that maybe might not be there otherwise. Finally, we do a little bit of research. In this sense, we are something like a think tank. I'll just call your attention to an article that I published in today's New York Times, Cafe Mayor and Me. It gives you a sense of where I stand on the issue of gatekeepers and civil society. So I do this quite frequently. I make appearances on Greek television from time to time. And we publish also in a blog entitled Politis, Citizen, talking about the contemporary issues of citizenry in Greece and abroad. We commission polls and other sorts of public service initiatives. We commissioned a poll of the Public Opinion Research Unit at the University of Macedonia. We worked with the cameramen who are here today, representing a nonprofit organization, an element of civil society in Thessaloniki. Adar, Dimitris, Savaidis, and Asterios Gousios are taking the video today. And we've done a variety of things like that, which might not be done by any other particular actor, particularly in the city of Thessaloniki. Okay, that's what I have had to say to you about the operation of the Dukakis Center. We're named after the 1988 Democratic nominee for President of the United States, Michael S. Dukakis, who's 82 and still very active in public life. He's an antidote, personally, for the kind of populism that we're suffering in the United States and other countries around the world, and we would like to carry the banner of that person's model and ethos. Now, I have one further event that I'd like to announce before we turn to our speakers. In June, we will host Jeffrey Engel, professor of political science at Southern Methodist University, for a discussion of his book on the foreign policy of the late George H.W. Bush. Bush ran against Dukakis in 1988 and won, and had what was perhaps the most eventful presidency in modern memory in terms of foreign policy, so we will commemorate that. He's also a great public servant. Whatever you think of the outcome of the election in 1988, he's a role model that we would like to uphold as well. And if all goes well, we'll bring Professor Engel to Athens on June 10. So I will hopefully have some news about that for you in the coming days and weeks. Now, I'm very pleased to have proposed to Anna Damascu to do an event like this. She saw the merit immediately. She came up with the idea of gatekeeper. She challenged me in the way few of my colleagues at ACT do, to give me some food for thought. What is it to be a gatekeeper? Am I a gatekeeper? Are we gatekeepers? Is it our role to be a gatekeeper of democracy? What can that possibly mean? So I thought, okay, let's invite representatives of think tanks and of NGOs, elements of civil society together, people who might not necessarily sit at the same table, and let's see if we can answer that question. What is it to be a gatekeeper of democracy? And where do we stand in Greece? We're pleased to have as our keynote speaker Dr. James McGann of the Think Tanks and Civil Societies program at the University of Pennsylvania, who's been undertaking an inquiry into these kinds of questions, not only in the United States, but globally. He and 2 think tanks in Spain hosted the annual European Think Tank Summit in Madrid a few weeks ago, and it's our earnest hope that we will host such an event in Greece in the very near future. Now, with that, I'd like to turn to our first speaker, This is Tholoris Georgakopoulos, who is the editorial director of the NGOs here in Athens, and I think he's a personage who's extremely well known to most of you, so I'll dispense with the normal niceties of a formal introduction. Tholoris, welcome.
Thank you, David. Thank you for this kind invitation. This is a topic that's very interesting for us, obviously, and I'm going to be brief because I'm really looking forward to hear the other speakers and their input on that, and especially our keynote speaker today. In case you don't know what the Aneosis does, a short introduction: we are a non-profit think tank based here in Athens. We publish studies and research on major issues. We have published 37 studies. We've organized 44 public events in Greece and abroad, with over 100 speakers that have been attended by 10,000 citizens, about 10,000 citizens. All of that in 3.5 years. We are independently funded. We don't do studies on behalf of others. We don't receive payments from the European Union or any other source. We just have our budget covered by our initial founder, Greek industrialist Dimitris Daskalopoulos. So what we do, we try to add facts and easily verifiable data in the local, the national public discourse. And we try to propose new policies to solve the major problems that our country is facing. So I was asked by David to present some relevant results to the theme of today's presentation. But first, I would like to stress one key takeaway that we have from our short experience in the Greek think tank and civil society ecosystem. We found that there is a huge gap, a huge need for this type of work, for open and publicly available research, for data, for policy recommendations. We did not predict that the need would be so great that an organization like ours would be welcomed with open arms by all political parties, by this government, by other institutions, by other think tanks. We have cooperated with actually both of my co-speakers here, both in studies and in event planning. And there is this fledgling ecosystem that's producing great work. It has been producing good work for a very long time, but there's a huge need for more. I don't know what you can make of this, but I would like to stress this very important thing that we learned in the first 3.5 years of our existence. Now, when it comes to our findings, the main thing that I thought would be interesting to you when it comes to Greece and democracy is the issue of trust. A few months ago, about a year ago, the Aneosis, in cooperation with EKE, I don't know how we translate it's a think tank, it's a nationally funded, publicly funded, and it does social studies. We cooperated to conduct for the first time in Greece the World Values Survey. It's a global survey that takes place every 5 years in dozens of countries. Greece participated for the first time. It doesn't count ephemeral opinions or what citizens think about current issues, but it tries to study longer values and chart trends. And it's also very good to compare different societies and where they are values-wise. So Greece participated for the first time last year, but it has participated in other social studies in previous years. And what we found from the analysis of our results is that we are more or less values-wise right in the middle. We are more conservative than Scandinavian countries in some sense, but more progressive than many Eastern European countries, Latin American nations, or African countries. When some researchers charted the values of all the countries who participate in these types of social studies, we were smack in the middle, right in the middle, like more or less the average of humanity when it comes to values. With one exception, though, the issue of trust. Now, traditionally, in all studies, Greeks show a very low level of trust in institutions, in democratic institutions. This particular survey showed that we show equally low levels of trust to each other. We trust others. Our trust when it comes to others is very low. When the survey asked whether others are worthy of our trust, are trustworthy, in 2008 and in 1999, only 21% of Greeks answered yes, that people are trustworthy. The percentage in the most recent World Value Survey in New Zealand, for example, was 55%. In Germany, it was 44.6%. In Yemen, during the civil war, it was 38.5%. So before the crisis, the level of trust among each other was very low. It was around the level of trust in Pakistani society or in Turkish society, and that was before the crisis began. Now in 2017, the percentage here in Greece had receded more. Now it's in the single digits. Only 8.3% Greeks maintain that other strangers are trustworthy. This is a percentage that's similar in societies like Colombia, Ghana, Zimbabwe, and Libya. And this is the only outlier in this survey. This is the only issue where we're significantly different. Otherwise, values-wise, we are a pretty modern country right in the middle of the road. But this is the one thing that's very different. And this is also one reason for us to be pessimistic for the future and to be pessimistic for the health of our democracy. Of course, there are other nations that face similar issues, and as it turns out, Greeks are not inherently genetically different, faulty, because when we travel abroad, we integrate in other societies very well, and we learn to trust people. We're not clinically undisciplined and mistrustful. But that should mean that it's also something that goes away, that can be cured. One could say that this is an issue of education and political will, that someone should start enforcing rules during our daily lives in order for trust to build, in order for civil society to flourish. But I'm not sure about that. What I think that the main takeaway is that we should have that problem in the back of our minds, and whenever there's a way and an opportunity for us to help civil society flourish, we should take that opportunity and we should try to bring the level of trust up in the center of our policies. And with that, I would like to give, I'm sure I didn't use too much of your time, but I think that's a good start for this discussion.
Thank you, Theodore. I think, Anna, I think I'll ask Yorgos to follow up because they collaborate together and we'll have those methods. Okay? We'll just invert the order. So, Yorgos Siakas, with whom we collaborated on 3 occasions up in Thessaloniki, the Public Opinion Research Unit at the University of Macedonia Research Institute.
Yeah.
Which is a lot of words.
Yeah.
Hardly covers all the work you do. Welcome to Athens.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here, and thank you, David, for having us. Theodoris said in his first sentences that he will be very brief. I don't know if he managed to do that, but I will try to be brief also. Not like Theodoris, but really brief. So, what do we do? What are we? Many people know us as a polling institute. We're not that. Actually, we're not only that. We are 3 into 1. We are a research institute, so we provide insights, we provide analytics, we provide some work on what's going on and some further elaboration on just simple findings. We're data providers, we do that. We have also collaborated with David, we have also collaborated with Oloris. We haven't collaborated with you, I don't know if... Not yet, good. But that's very nice. It has a microphone easier, so I will try to speak up without using technology. And third, we are a non-profit professional organization. This is what we are. So we provide, we're giving opportunities to young people. We're giving opportunities to students, to university students, to work in a very strict and very stressed professional environment. So this is a wrap-up of what our. And now, what do we do? Regarding the aspects that David attempted to identify, the democracy, one of the major issues, rather than the trust, is one of the attributes of democracy, and this is democratic participation. And democratic participation is one of the issues that we have collaborated with David. We organized, we co-host an event with the title, What is This? Disengagement, etc., etc. And we attempted to identify what influences people to participate, and mostly what influences young people. As you know, turnout in younger ages is lower than the older ages. And one of the aspects, one of the variables that probably could explain that is the lack of trust, because if Oloris, I'm pretty sure that I want to elaborate on the findings he referred to, trust in younger ages is even lower in the political institutions. So what does this create? Cynicism, apathy, and political alienation. And these are some of the first stages of the problems in the democratic participation and the problems in the democratic process and the integration of younger people. Why trust is important? It is important. First of all, I would like to give two dimensions of trust. The one is the trust in our daily life and in our exchanges, in the way that we are being we're incorporated in the society, the first one. And the second one is trust as a motivation for political and rather than the individual participation in daily life. Low trust creates problem in both two dimensions. And this is a problem this is an issue that we face that in Greece. Because as Oloris mentioned, it's not an issue of Greeks, it's an issue of Greeks into Greece. For example, we have many problems in daily life, we have problems in professional life, we have problems in the exchange with the public sector, etc., etc. Could we try to accommodate that? Could we try to fix it? I don't know that. And let me move on the issue of the role of the non-profit agents and the NGOs. One of the major issues and one of the major positive externalities that these institutions create is to put people into the public sphere without the process of the public offices. This is something that could be very helpful, and this is something that could create new opportunities and new ways of getting people into the public arena. This is for the beginning.
Thank you, George. That was succinct, and I'm pleased that our third panelist is with us now. This is Professor Michael, who shares with our keynote speaker connection with the University of Pennsylvania. Nikos did his PhD at the University of Pennsylvania, he tells me, and I don't remember when, so we'll leave it at that. He's here representing a different kind of institution. When I think of think tanks in Greece, I think of EOVE. And I don't know, maybe you'll tell me whether this is right or wrong. But this is a place where significant research is done, and where the opinions that you generate and the conclusions you reach are conclusions that we take very seriously. So representing now the Foundation for Economic Industrial Research, as we call the EOVE in Greek, is Nikos Vetas. Nikos, welcome.
Thank you. Yes, it's better to forget when I got my PhD. It was in the last century. It was so far back. All right. Also, I apologize for being late. I was hung up with one of the two people in the world with whom I'm generally afraid, and that's my dentist. So I couldn't do much. All right. First, let me tell you a thing about what EOVE is, because actually it's an opportunity, because there is often a confusion. EOVE deals with issues about the Greek economy, with research on the various aspects, the macroeconomics, the sectoral, the fiscal, pretty much everything. That's one, but then on top of that, it has at its mandate to try to communicate in plain words the findings of this research. So this is not plainly economic, academic research. It was founded back in 1975, so it's not a coincidence that it was just after the dictatorship, because independent think tanks like that cannot actually survive in undemocratic regimes. And for the first actually couple of decades, it had a close association with the Confederation of Industries. And in fact, the iota in front of EOVE back then meant institute. Later, it was changed into an idrima, along with the fact that it became financially fully independent. So we are a non-profit public benefit foundation. There is still some, the fact that we have kept the industrial part in our acronym is actually, which was done on purpose, because we believe that you cannot have an economy without industry. But it does create some confusion, because when people that don't know much about what you are hear this, then they think that you somehow belong to some industrialist or something like that. But anyway, that's the name. So what we do is every year we have some periodic studies. First of all, in collaboration, actually for the European Commission, we do measure the economic climate in the economy. So this is what perhaps you see in the papers every month, other than August, where you cannot have any reason for sample, because people are just having a good time. And we're doing this with this is done with the same methodology across years and across all the European Union countries. So this is important, because there are many entities that measure climate, but unless you can compare apples to apples and oranges to apples, then you cannot really say something. Every 3 months we publish our quarterly report. In the old times, it used to be pretty much the only one, other than the one of the Bank of Greece. Now there are many economic entities, from the Parliament's office to the Fiscal Council to the commercial banks research department. So there is a lot of information. But so rather than simply producing the numbers, we put emphasis on interpreting the numbers and trying to forecast based on the current numbers how things are likely to be in the future. And actually we have been a little bit lucky, because in the last few years we have come very close to what the actual numbers ended up being. Maybe it wasn't just luck, maybe it was. This made us a little bit unpleasant to the Greek and European institutions that typically would predict numbers that we were telling them they could not get, and then when they were not getting them, then they were blaming us for telling them they would not getting them. But anyway, that's what it is. And then we run a number of ad hoc studies. Actually, these run from industry studies, from sectoral studies, from plastics to tourism to shipping, whatever. Impact analysis. So if hypothetically you want to privatize the port of Piraeus, what you can expect is going to happen in the Greek economy. That's a question that you can quantify. Impact analysis of taxes. So if you raise this tax rate or if you lower this tax rate, what you expect is going to happen. But also issues that you would not necessarily think that they are primarily economics, such as, for instance, we are presenting tomorrow in a press conference the 5th in a series of studies on the relation between the education system and the economy. And this is twofold, because on the one hand we're spending a lot of public and private money on the education system, but obviously through the education system we also generate people that will work one way or the other. Now, I have to say a word about funding. So the fact that we are independent creates also a stress. We have zero public money. We have zero systematic sponsors. And basically what we do is we rely on the generosity of people, which in a country like Greece with low trust, so that's not easy. And then we try to convince people that a certain study has to be done, and then we motivate them that they have to support it. So this is our model. All right, that's what it is. Rather, however, than just presenting what we do, I want to pick up the key words of what is being discussed here and say a thing or another. Because being an economist in Greece the last 10 years has been similar to being like an earthquake specialist in Indonesia. Okay? We have been in the middle of things. A crisis like the one that we have been going through is actually unprecedented in terms of its dimensions, not just the depth of the recession, also the fact that you have been trying, you were for a number of years on a convergence path with European average numbers, and then you are on a free-fall divergence. Obviously, economics has a lot to do with politics. Let me make a number of statements, some of which are actually a little bit, perhaps, anyway. The first statement I want to make is that collectively, as the Greeks, but also those who gave us money and those who have been monitoring the Greek economy, have massively failed the last 10 years. In one thing, we have failed in transforming the Greek economy from what it was into something new. And I can describe in a sense, in a word, what it was and what it is. The thing is that the Greek economy, in terms of its institutions, is a lot more closed and less transparent, also to use the word from the transparency thing, than most other small European economies. So what happened over the last 10 years is that the economy has become much smaller. Also, a fence has been put around the Greek economy so that it's not a danger either to itself or to others. However, we have not created a new dynamic, at least not yet. Now, I do not necessarily blame one person or another, certainly, well, maybe not today. But we are still similar to what we were, but smaller, with less of a dynamic. All right. We cannot do much harm from now on, but we cannot do much good from now on either. That's one thing. The second thing is about the issue of trust that was brought up by Theodoris, and then I think it's overall an issue that's being discussed. What on earth is trust? You know, it's hard to measure, actually. You can ask people if they trust others. You can indirectly measure it. For instance, me as an economist, I know that in an economy where there is trust, we tend to put more resources in investment rather than in consumption. Because what is investment versus consumption? Basically, it's as if you have, you know, in your two hands, you have a bunch of seeds, and then you can do a number of things with it, right? Either you can eat it today, and that's consumption, or you can put it on the ground, and that's investment. However, if you don't trust what is going to take place from when you put it on the ground until this becomes actually new production, then you would rather eat it. So one thing from an economist's viewpoint is the margin between consumption and investment. The second is the margin between investment and other investments. If you actually think about, I think it's unfair and also unproductive to describe the problem of the Greek economy and why Greece got into this deep crisis as simply because we were consuming too much rather than investment. If you actually look at the numbers carefully, the average investment percentage in the Greek economy over the last 30 years or so was pretty much in the European average. This is a surprise when people hear it. They think it wasn't. What was less, significantly less, what was about half of what it was in other small European economies like Denmark or like Sweden, and so on and so forth, was actually the level of corporate investment. You say, well, what's the difference between corporate investment and other investment? Well, where would we invest our money? Where was the average Greek household investing its money? Okay, so it's actually useful. And actually, I don't know if you guys at the NGOs have ever thought of this, but maybe you can think about it. So, those of you who know how the average Greek household was in the 50s, so now I'm going really back in the last century. Greece was completely destroyed because after the World War, then we were smart enough to also have a civil war. We were not more destroyed than the average of Europe. The whole of Europe was destroyed, but it was a destroyed and poor country. People were working hard, and they were not consuming much in the 50s, also in the 60s. But whatever they were saving, they were making it, they were turning this into one or two types of investments. One, and it's obvious to those of you who have actually traveled primarily through rural Greece, is people were building a house. They wanted a home for them and for their children. They didn't have one, and they were building one. Actually, it's almost funny how this was built, right? I mean, they didn't take mortgages. There was no private lending in Greece was always very low. That's another instance of not having trust. They would work in whatever it was they would do, then they would take the money and they would build like half of a first floor. And then after they worked another 3 or 4 years, they would build the other half. And then when their daughters would grow up, then they would build kind of a second floor or something like that. I'm serious, this is how Greece got from the 50s to the 70s. Along with the fact that then we gradually moved from the rural areas to the urban areas and we created this mess. But we were investing in primarily in housing. That was one of the two areas where the Greeks were investing. What's the second one, you know? So let me make this, let's pretend that we are, yes, let's pretend this is interactive. I'm so sorry for...
Yeah, no, I don't know.
All right, good. So now I can pretend I'm smart.
No, you have to put the phone on.
No, let's not overdo it.
Not too much democracy. Not too much democracy.
Democracy is overrated. Okay, I'll get back to that. Okay, the second area where the Greeks were investing was actually the education of their children. Massively, okay, massively. They were exaggerating. They wanted their children to move from the rural areas to the urban areas. They wanted their children to have master's degrees. They wanted their children to all become lawyers and doctors. They wanted their children to move to the UK or wherever, or then later to Romania if they couldn't move anywhere else. Education, education, education. For many reasons, I'm not blaming this, okay? It was rational, it was mostly a good thing. However, they were spending most of their money on housing and their children. What was it that they were not investing in? They were not investing in corporations. So unlike the Dutch and the Belgians and the Swedes and the Italians, we did not have, the stock market was basically nothing to be trusted. We didn't have a developed capitals market. We didn't have ways to translate private savings into productivity. So when the crisis hit, it found the average Greek household with 2 houses on average, 5 master degrees, and no jobs. And then how you rebalance all this, okay? You have to kind of start channeling these savings into investment. One last word about democracy, which is obviously almost tautologically the best way to run a country. Yet, we have to think deeply how you can not only implement, but also converge to a set of reforms that is needed in democracy. Because the issue with reforms is that typically the costs are more short run and the benefits are longer run. So you have to convince people to vote for policies that may have some immediate pain, but will make them better off later. That's an issue. The second thing is that if you actually see what are the parts of the world that have been growing faster in the last 10 or 15 years, these are not democracies. Okay, it's China, it's Russia, come on, it's not really a democracy. It's the Arab Emirates, and then you say, but isn't a democracy a good thing for economics as well? Yes, but not so much if you're really low and you want to grow. In that area, in that case, if you have somebody that can tell people what to do, like the Chinese do, they say you don't consume, you invest. And actually you invest here and there. Then it works to take you from here to there. But it cannot take you from there, which is where we are, to up there. Because to go from there to there, and if you cannot see if you are behind this rock, even higher, you need institutions that would actually foster investment in human capital and innovation. So the problem with Greece is that we don't have these institutions yet. The crisis made us smaller, it corrected imbalances, but we still don't have the foundations for actually investing more in this human capital that actually is necessary so that it moves you from being a number 23 or number 30 in the world to being one of the top 15. Thank you.
The emphasis on institutions appeals to me as a political scientist because we would say typically your gatekeepers are institutions like the one you just described. Now, we have a habit, at least I do, of thinking that a person in a think tank sits and reads and writes and maybe submits a report to someone who's going to make a decision, and that's the work of a think tanker. The work of someone in NGOs is to go out and look at a problem and try to work on a project that help people, and there's a dissociation between thought and action. And our next speaker is here to tell me that my model is completely wrong. What Anna Damasco has done at Transparency International and what she and her colleagues continue to do is much akin to what we would do in a traditional think tank. So we thought it would be rather interesting as a way of maybe transitioning from this panel to the next panel to hear how NGOs go about the work of research that we associate typically with think tanks. Anna Damasco, welcome.
Thank you. This is one reason why Transparency International sits in this panel. The other reason, and I must reveal to our audience, is for the sake of equilibrium. There were more NGOs than think tanks, and this is a conclusion that we have to draw out of this room today. A few words about Transparency International first. Transparency International was established in Berlin in 1993 by a bunch of high-profile people that decided to take a stance against corruption. The Greek chapter was among the first ones, established in 1996. Today, Transparency International has chapters in more than 100 states. The vision of Transparency International as a global movement is that governments, the business sector, civil society, and the daily lives of citizens should be free of corruption and full of transparency, accountability, integrity, solidarity, justice, democracy. In fact, we try to steer the public conscience, the collective conscience, into change. It's true that Transparency International has achieved inter alia in many states, for example, the prosecution of corrupt leaders and the seizure of their illicit property. It has happened that national elections have been won or lost on the basis of debates related to corruption. Obviously, this is not enough. And as David very well mentioned, Transparency, we perceive ourselves not only as a campaigning advocacy NGO, but also as a think tank, as a research unit. Our top research product is the so-called Corruption Perception Index. You might have heard of that. We publish it for the past 25 years. Practically what we do is we rank 180 countries of the globe with regard to the level of their public sector corruption as perceived by experts and the business community, not by the everyday citizen. And today I'm going to focus on the Corruption Perception Index of 2018, which was announced back in January 2019, for not only because it's the most recent one, but because in this particular corruption index there was a cross-analysis with global democracy data. And the conclusions were really revealing. There is a clear link between corruption and the health of democracies. No full democracies scored, let's say, there's an average of 50. And there are no full democracies that score below 50. And also very few countries with autocratic regimes scored higher than 50. The continued failure of countries to significantly control corruption leads to weak democracies. And then there is a vicious circle where there is weak democracy, there's obviously an inclination to corruption. And countries with high corruption are, as you know, very dangerous for political opponents. Practically all the countries in the world where political killings were ordered or condoned by the government took place in countries that were ranked as highly corrupt. And let me focus on Europe. We have Euro elections. Let me say a few words about Europe. It's true that Western Europe and the European Union is doing better than the rest of the parts of the world. But we still have a long way to go with corruption. We have not prioritized anti-corruption reforms, and at the same time, there is a populistic rhetoric in many countries, which results to the weakening of democratic institutions. Therefore, in view of these Euro elections, Transparency International has introduced a so-called pledge, a stand up for integrity, we call it, this pledge, and we invite all candidates for the European Parliament to commit, if they get elected, to a few things. First of all, to be transparent and ethical in all their parliamentary activities, to give details to the public about how they spend the allowances they are granted, to accept meetings only with registered lobbyists, and to publish online the minutes of those meetings. And then we ask them to have a cool-off period once they step out of office, meaning that as long as they take the so-called transition allowance, we ask them not to represent all those lobbyists that are registered in the EU Transparency Register. And finally, we ask all those candidates, if they get elected, to support the establishment at the EU level of an ethics oversight body, which will observe conflicts of interest, revolving doors, and lobby issues. There is a broader reform agenda by Transparency International for the EU, because we believe that the EU should primarily care about the human rights of its citizens, and also how to how to lift all those barriers of these citizens so that they produce their potential. We believe that we can altogether renew the values of the European Union. And let me come to our country. I mean, we have regional elections, we will have national elections in the course of 2019. In the Corruption Perception Index of 2018, unfortunately, Greece marked a regression with 45 points on the CPI. What does 45 points mean? First of all, it means that we're below the 50-point average, and then we're also below the 49-point average of the so-called flawed democracies. Full democracies, they scored an average of 75 points. Given all this data, Transparency International, in the Corruption Perception Index of 2018, it phrased a few suggestions how the international climate could be improved. Among the suggestions, a very crucial one is calling on all competent actors to strengthen civil society, especially those actors of civil society that promote the political engagement of citizens and the oversight of the public sector by citizens. Particularly those entities acting at the local level, and this is very important having in mind the local elections that we have in a few days. The NGO world, the civil society, I mean, is well motivated, is well heard in some cases, but we need to prove our credibility and our effectiveness in the long term and on a continuous basis. One of the main reasons we feel that Transparency International has been effective in its work for the past years is that it's politically not partisan, and then because also it places great importance on its independence. No donor has a say in its policies, and we get no public sector money. In Transparency International Greece, operating in the not unregulated but loosely regulated civil society environment, we have taken our own initiatives. We publish our financials and our donors without having a legal obligation to do that on an annual basis, and we're also audited by external auditors on an annual basis without, again, having such a legal obligation. In 2006, Transparency International was among Greece was among the 16 organizations which signed the so-called International Non-Governmental Accountability Charter. You can imagine what this charter is. And it's practically a self-commitment to operate according to the principles and the rules of the charter, and committing to good governance, to transparency, and to being subject to social scrutiny. In 2013, Transparency International Greece suggested a draft law to all political parties, aiming at enhancing the transparency and accountability of NGOs operating in Greece. We asked for the operation, among other things, of a competent supervisory authority, an authority which would inter alia check the financials periodically of NGOs. It would enable publicity with regard to publicity guarantees with regard to NGOs. Nothing has happened yet. Let's see if with the new government we might have better results in that. And on a personal note, and I will close here, I must say the following. I mean, I'm asked every now and then by journalists, international journalists, local journalists, to make a statement personally as the chair of the board of Transparency International Greece about all kinds of current topics. I mean, transparency has a credibility, and they want to seek for an opinion. As a personal choice, I do only research-backed statements, meaning that unless Transparency International at the global level or Transparency International Greece has a particular research on the topic, I refuse to make statements, not even a statement, along the general principles and lines of the transparency ideals. And when I make a statement about the topic, I have chosen to stick to the conclusions of the research. So I don't express my personal opinion. I mean, I'm a relatively thinking human being. I could say something, personal. I never do that. I refuse to do that. I feel that, it's I become me, not only me, but also the organization, an easy target because I could easily get discredited by any organization, by a third party.
Well, you kind of bring up another topic here, and then that might be why we personally get involved and how much of ourselves do we invest in the work we do. Civil society is generally not a place to go to make a fortune unless you're corrupt. But that might be a question. I just have maybe this and a few other topics. My thoughts as I was listening to the speakers, and then we'd open the floor. We have a couple of minutes for a question and answer session before we move on to the next topic. I'm still not certain whether the organizations here function as gatekeepers, so I might ask you explicitly if that's your role. And if we think somehow that civil society in Greece, at the very least, is in the process of some sort of transition, what might a new paradigm of civil society be? I have a feeling that one of our speakers in the next session has an idea what this might be. Think tanks then. This is a session dedicated to think tanks. And we've heard a lot of activity and a lot of projects, and I'm less clear than I was when I started what a think tank actually is. I mean, is the Obey a think tank? Pure and simple. Are you an NGO pure and simple? It seems to me that maybe we try to put ourselves in a shell, and there's a lot more that we do, especially when you discuss the idea of addressing the general public. That's not necessarily something we would associate with a person working at a think tank trying to influence decision making. I had the thought several times, listening to the speakers now, that we represent a kind of elite. And civil society and elites are not necessarily in sync with one another. So I wonder whether my perception is misguided a little bit. Those are the couple themes that I noted to myself as I was listening to our speakers. I'd like to open the floor to questions. We'll take 3 questions, and then we'll do a round of answers, and we'll see if we have time to continue. Ask that you make your question brief so that everyone has an opportunity to answer and participate. Does somebody have a question on the floor? Yes. Please, yeah.
Thank you.
Identify yourself, please, sir.
Sorry, my name is Lambros Anagnosopoulos. I'm involved in the broader Anatolia Act group as a trustee, but I'm a businessman. So my question is as follows. Having heard Mr. Vetas and Mr. Georgakopoulos, I understand that democracy is based on a number of items. Sorry, better now. So democracy is based on a few things, including statistics. So basically say that once you elect, once the people vote, statistically they vote towards the right direction. Now this has come under attack recently by what we call broadly populism or fake news, which in essence transforms the decision any way they want to, by using data or big data, whatever you want to say. The question is, can democracy defend itself? And therefore, is it the fact that we have the lowest trust possible ever anywhere helpful to the extent that we don't believe in it? Thank you.
Okay. Another question. We'll take a couple more here. Maybe Alec Malley in the front row. Drew, front row, please.
Thank you. My name is Alec Malley, former
former U.S. diplomat here in Athens in the economic section of the embassy and consul general of Thessaloniki, currently with Foresight Strategy and Communications, which runs an NGO, so I know a little bit about an NGO called Repower Greece, and some work in journalism as well. But I'm really interested, and I'll probably grab Mr. Yordakopoulos at some point in the question at length on the issue of trust. Mr. Ventis, you got in a little bit after the remarks that talked about the issue of trust in Greek society, and that particular data point being an outlier. But as an economist myself, that sort of flashed in my head immediately the linkage between the lack of trust and the problems we have in investment, things like that, convincing investors that this is a country to take a look at. So I definitely want to talk about that later, but any points you have, because the other negative conclusion, you yourself said there can be some negative conclusions drawn from this data, is that maybe there is a deep problem with trust in the society that sets up a situation where no amount of structural reform is really going to make the country a great place to invest. Just not sure. That's, I think, something we need to discuss and investigate in a little bit more detail. Thank you.
One more question, and the gentleman here in the plaid shirt. The microphone is coming from behind you, sir. Identify yourself, please.
My name is George Papanikolaou. I work as a journalist at the Economikos Technologies for 25 years. I want to ask this simple question as a simple citizen. We're talking a lot about trust in the economy and in the public and democratic institutions. But, and we say, one of the gentlemen who spoke earlier, say, that there is evidence that the younger people, they don't show that trust as the older ones. So that means, that democracy and the democratic process is in pretty big danger. But I didn't understand why. Have we gone beyond the finding of the trust and knowing why? And is it because all the democratic process is proven up to now, I mean tonight, if I may say so, there will be an exchange of Molotov bombs just a few blocks around further down. And in Kesariani, in other places, where they have the Fishes trial, it's been going on for more than 4 years. So it is effectiveness, I think, and not just trust. People see, the effectiveness of what is going on today, or what has happened a few years back, and how can they trust anything? Thank you.
So it's a question of the chicken or the egg. Maybe we'll start with Phil to read, because some of the questions were directed toward you. Maybe Nico, you want to address this too?
Yes, is there a deep problem with trust? Probably yes. It's a deep problem, deep-rooted. It stems from a long history of our nation, from the way our nation was built. Society was never built on trust. We never built cohesive communities with people supporting each other. The only societal unit that works in Greece that has the enormously that has a Catholic trust by everyone is family. The family unit is the unit, the societal unit that works in our country. It has been like this forever. And this is corroborated by what Nikos said about what Greeks invested in. Their families, their homes, their children's education, not civil society, not their local community. You can see the effects of this problem every day when you walk outside, when you see how Greeks within their own countries treat public spaces. So this may be a deep-rooted problem. And whether it can be unsolvable, maybe so. Maybe it depends on which time frame we're referring to. We may never see a Greek society that has sturdy civil society institutions, with a Greek society where neighborhoods are organized and people work together to reach common solutions. But in the case that it is not unsolvable, I think the only pathway open to a solution, to a possible solution, is to give more power to civil society organizations that exist, more funding, to start having people see in their communities solutions being implemented by people working together. I was in the United States, in Houston. I talked to a university professor there at Rice. He studies societies that are in perpetual conflict. He went to Bosnia, he's been to Rwanda, societies that were ripped apart by civil wars, where neighbors would kill their neighbors with machetes, this kind of situation. And he found that even in these societies, people can be made to live together and work together by doing two things: keeping them in the same place, not separating them, keeping them in the same place, and having them work together toward common solutions, to solve common problems. This way you can make even deeply divided societies to work together. So I don't think that it's a solution is inconceivable. It's going to be hard, and I don't see any other way than empowering the civil society that we have here today.
I don't really know. It's just a broad topic. One thing to keep in to put in perspective, though, Greece is not a third world country. We are one of the rich and prosperous countries in the world, with even where we are today, with a relatively high standard of living, long life expectancy, high literacy, relatively high inclusion of women into the labor force, very low infant mortality, reasonably safe. So this is not a third world country. And that, in fact, makes the question even harder, right? How you go, as I said before, from a country that most metrics is now something like number 40 in the world or whatever, how you make it to be in the elite club of the top 20, where, mind you, most of those, we like it or not, have been following a particular type of tradition in organizing their economies and their societies, which is the Anglo-Saxon model. It's the Americans, it's the Brits, their periphery, and a few others that used to be the centers of colonies, of the colonial world, right? So it's not so easy. Greece was nothing in terms of its structure as a country 200 years ago or less. It is where it is. So yes, we can talk about trust, but you have to be realistic about what countries can do. Now, how easily you can change, because I think you mentioned it's chicken or egg. You have to go from an equilibrium to a new one. And that's why I sounded disappointed at the start of my initial intervention, because a crisis is the opportunity to change. And once you miss the opportunity of a crisis, then it's hard. Okay? Then you have to either change, either wait for a big political movement, or you have to wait for a new crisis. The first I don't see, the second I fear.
So we're stuck, what you see.
So no, I mean we're stuck, but we have to take one step at a time, and we now. One last thing, because you asked, what is it? Facts and numbers are very important. The questions that are now being put in front of voters are complicated questions, right? Do you want to be in a common currency? Right? This is a complicated question. You need educated people. And on top of that, you need that there is at least a number, part of the political spectrum that would not systematically lie. And I'm saying this, I know I'm using very strong words, but the truth of the matter is that the vast majority of the political spectrum during the 10 years of the Greek crisis, they were just lying. Okay, they were telling people what people may be willing to hear. And then when they came to the edge of the cliff, they said, oh, now I have no other option. Now, this may be expected, right? I mean, if somebody has to vote for you, why would you tell them the rough truth, how it is? But the fact that we have seen a lot of lies during the last 10 years, including what we're going through this week, which is that the government is telling us that the economy is doing great, and as a result of that, we can actually spend money left and right, which is that the economy is not doing great. And I know this from the mere fact that the plan of the government was that the economy is going to grow by 2.5% this year, and it's only growing by 2% or less. So we are missing a couple of billions. And then we're telling you we're doing well because we taxed this guy and then we're giving it to this guy. This is not the economy doing well, right? The economy is doing well is if the total product is going up and we're having more jobs. But then the people are so tired, perhaps, or disillusioned or whatever, that they're happy to hear this fairy tale. So part of our jobs here is to put the facts there, and if the citizens want to hear the facts, good. If the politicians want to be based on the facts, even better. The fact that many of them want shouldn't stop us from doing our job.
David, may I?
Yeah, please.
Well, eventually it turned to be a discussion on issue of trust, but I would like to modify that. Nikos and Theodoris said something about how this society was formed and how this country was formed. And they both said that although we have serious problems, this country flourishes. Well, actually, in order to go back to your question, a fully functional democracy, a liberal type of democracy, a Western type of democracy, is based on two pillars: the majority principle and the liberal principle. Majority principle means that the majority decides, and the liberal principle means that there is the rule of law, accountability, etc., and the respect to the minority and the human rights, and to individual rights. So this kind of, these two pillars face serious challenges in Greece. But, okay, we're not in the edge of the cliff, we're fine. We're not as fine as we could be or we should have been, but we're fine. Why? Because on some crucial moments, we decided on the right side of the history. European Union, common currency, and this kept us alive. So, sometimes trust is a key indicator of something goes wrong. And what is the antidote to low trust? Leadership. Because this is an important element of how societies could be formed and how countries go ahead. Institutions, social re-identification and reconstruction, but first and foremost, leadership.
Do we have time for another round? I think we're going to have to go to the next session here, and I apologize for that. Perhaps we'll come back to your questions afterwards. So we'll evacuate the premises, invite the next set of panelists to approach the stage, and my colleague Anna Damascu will moderate that session. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
What is civil society? It's the area, he says, from the doorsteps of our households to the entrances of public services. I particularly like this definition. What's the framework of this discussion? We gave our panelists some questions. I mean, the aim tonight is to map the track record of the Greek NGOs and their involvement in promoting democracy. Democracy promotion, like democracy itself, is under fire nowadays, globally, not only locally. Greece has a rich and varied tradition in civil society activism, and thus we gave our panelists number of questions. I will pop them up now and each one can choose what to answer. Is it legitimate to think of civil society as a gatekeeper of democracy? How does one best preserve, promote, and strengthen democratic institutions conceptually and practically? What is the proper role of the civil society in this endeavor? Is there a causative linkage between civil society and democracy? We've been discussing this with the previous panel as well. Is the role of civil society threatened by the rise of populism? What degree of coordination exists in Greece in the formulation and execution of pro-democracy projects among institutions which often cooperate but other times compete? And how should one legitimize and coordinate the work of civil society in this context? How clear and strong are the links between civil society and the Greek society? And whether there is a distinct role in this whole process for the media and the donors. So a lot of questions, not too much time. Tonight we have the privilege of having with us an NGO expert and activist, but also with a unique combination of being the Vice Mayor for Civil Society and Innovation. We're happy that the municipality of Athens has such a position. And this is Amalia Zeppo representing this institution. She has created the digital platform Syntagma, which was further developed into an idea that won one of the 5 Mayor's Challenge Awards of €1 million from Bloomberg Philanthropies in September 2014. Prior to her service in the municipality, she was working as an independent documentary producer since 1998. In 2007, she got involved in the neighborhood projects and was awarded the Eco Hero by the Athens municipality in 2010. She has a bachelor's degree in social anthropology from the LSE and master's in media studies from the New School for Social Research in New York. The floor is yours. Thank you very much for being tonight with us.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I will try to be brief and try to put the conversation, put my description rather, around the subjects that we've been hearing about tonight. First to describe what Syntagma is. Syntagma was born during the 2010, 11 and 12 when I was myself participating at many initiatives in Athens, community projects that were really spontaneously and with improvisation taking place in Athens. Those were the years of crisis. And this is a civil society, just to start about with an attempt to start to define what civil society can look like in Greece. This was a civil society that, and people, individual people, that did not want to call themselves volunteers, but their numbers revealed that there was an increasing number of that population in the last years. So even though we're at the bottom of the European charts in volunteering, a lot of people were doing things in the public sphere, but they do not want to call themselves volunteers. The other characteristic of this rising number of active people is that they didn't want to relate themselves with NGOs. NGO has also negative connotations in the Greek cultural mind, or at least at that moment. So the proposal to the Mayor Gaminis at the time was to create a mechanism that could actually collect this invaluable pool of ideas and activities that people were genuinely doing in the public sphere. So we created Syntagma. In short, Syntagma is a platform that collects these activities and tries to connect them together, to connect them to the municipality itself, which is a labyrinth of services that they usually cannot find their way around. These people that usually do need things from it, like getting a permit to do something in the public sphere, etc., etc. To connect them also to sponsors, a growing number of businesses that have CSR, want to support in funding or in kind, those types of people. And to cut the long story short and to come to the point, We counted and have collected more than 4,000 activities just in the municipality of Athens in the last 5 years, with more than 380 of those community groups, those grassroots organizations that have been acting in the public sphere. What areas do they cover a little bit so that you have a visual representation of what they're doing? Well, from solidarity activities, helping homeless people, the refugees, or other solidarity activities, to doing things for kids, to also creating new types of guided tours in Athens, people that spontaneously like to tour tourists around the city. All these small, different types of activities in the public sphere, I think, reveal one thing: a new form of pride of Athenians for their city, and for the public, and the sense of ownership also in the city that had not been surfaced in the past. I think this is one opportunity that the crisis did give to us, to actually identify that there is something more than what we see under this pessimistic vision that we have about the Greek civil society. Now, why did these people want to upload their activities on the municipality platform? They did not trust the municipality platform. Thodoris was absolutely right. But is that a form of trust? Well, here is something quite audacious that happened at that particular moment from Mayor Gaminis, who said, let's turn the idea of trust around. Instead of obsessing that people don't trust institutions in Greece, let's try to trust them. Let's say, okay, you don't trust us, we'll trust you. Just to disrupt the vicious cycle. And one of the flag projects of this attempt was was the Kypseli market. The Kypseli market was one of many empty and abandoned public buildings in the city of Athens, a huge problem that not only Athens suffers from. At that moment, the municipality of Athens had secured the funding to refurbish the building, but had absolutely no capacity, either financial or managerial, to run it. So it was really out of need that the mayor said, well, what do we have? We have this capacity, this pool of people that are very active in that neighborhood. We have mapped them on the Syntagma map. We know who they are. Let's ask them not only what they want the markets to be, which would have been just an old traditional survey, but give it to them. Give it to them to run it themselves, to turn around completely the trust issue. It took many years until we actually did it, and I think this was a huge experiment. Now, if you ask me, are you happy with it? I think it took too long. It happened. You can see that there's potential there. If you actually try, it does happen. But it took so long. It was so difficult to pass all little decisions through the city council that it took 3, 4, 5 years to see it now open as it is today. So this is just one example to highlight some issues. I'm not looking at time. I'm sorry.
I am over.
Okay. Another type of example that highlights what these people are about, these people, is another project that we did about the graffiti phenomenon in the city. The mayor wanted, the municipality does not have the technical capacity to clean graffiti or to protect buildings from graffiti. But we had a lot of it, but we knew that for citizens it was very important. There were a lot of community groups that were cleaning or trying to help proprietors to clean their facades. The amount of people that after our open call that came to help create a strategy was quite comes from a very wide range. It was proprietors, it was shopkeepers, it was founders, as one would expect, but it was also NGOs, individuals, technical services, businesses, I mean, and normal people that just wanted to learn more about the graffiti phenomenon. I'm not saying that the municipality cleaned the city, right? It was just for 3 or 4 years, we really experimented to see how can the municipality, again, change its role, become the moderator of a potential interest in the public sphere of people that are usually not, trusted by institutions to actually take the lead and decide about a strategy that is usually belongs to the municipality. Okay, so this is just to say that there might be there, I think, and the platform of Syntagma is a test bed for research. So one of the things I want to do, because I'm not running again for elections, is to do some research now and to really reveal what I saw all those years, which is, I think, a different way to understand the Greek nature of what public activity is, and how they relate to the public sphere, how they relate to the commons, I think in different ways. It's culturally very different from the Anglo-Saxon world that we were hearing. But I think there is more to it than what we see. Just to end on a positive note. So, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
And moving to Stefanos Lukopoulos on my left, co-founder and managing director of Voulis Watch. He studied politics, international relations, and international conflict analysis in the UK and in Belgium. He has extensive experience working in the civil society sector in London, Brussels, and obviously in Greece. And prior to his involvement in the NGO field, he worked for the European Parliament in Brussels. And for the record, he's an advocate of the bottom-up approach in politics, active citizenship, and direct democracy. Thank you, Stefanos, for being here with us.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and I must say this is a bit of a disclaimer. I look younger than I am, so.
I see a lot of people, a lot of people are called, maybe we turn a little bit down the vision.
So that they don't fall asleep.
Yes.
At least that's what they used to do in the European Parliament. They used to have like air conditioning on really, really high so that people can stay awake.
So that was the blame for
Anyway, so a few words. I mean, the questions that Anna presented were like very interesting, and I hope that I'm gonna start tackling them like one by one, while explaining what we're about, and what our aims are, and our achievements, and our vision for a more transparent, open, and democratic Greece. So, a brief history. Voulis Watch is a non-for-profit parliamentary monitoring / transparency promoting organization. We started off in late 2015. We were legally registered in Athens, and our main goal is, and yes, we are romantic, our main goal is to cause or help sow the seeds, if you like, for a substantial paradigm shift in the political culture of Greece. A paradigm shift which would entail a larger level of transparency, accountability, of citizen participation, and obviously openness. Why did we decide to do this? Well, because as I said earlier on, we are romantics. We were a bunch of youngish people, at least young-looking people, working, living abroad. And we saw what was going on in Greece over the last few years with the financial crisis, especially with the rise of Golden Dawn and like extreme far right-wing groups, and especially this feeling of, among the youth, disenchantment and disillusionment with democracy. And in fact, small parenthesis, my biggest fear is that one day my 18-month-old daughter, when she's probably 18, will turn to me and say, I don't care about democracy. What is democracy? As long as I have enough food and safety and a job and I can buy a nice product, then I don't need democracy. And this is something that we wanted to challenge by creating Vuli Watch. How do we do this? Two ways. We started off by being solely a civic tech. Civic tech means like civic technology. So an organization which employs digital technology for the greater good, if you like, in order to promote democracy. And we thought that, and we stand by this, that the main value and the main element, if you like, of a true democracy is citizen engagement and participation. How do you achieve citizen engagement and participation? Via the access to information. How do you achieve access to information? Via transparency and openness. So this sums up, this is the equation that sums up what we do. So the first part of our work is dedicated on monitoring parliamentary activity, providing citizens with like first-hand information, open data through graphs, through visualizations of what's going on in Parliament, what's being decided, how MEPs vote, what MEPs say, and we do that through a website we call Vuli Watch. It's vuliwatch.gr. You can go and see it for yourselves. This website contains a series of digital applications which allow citizens to exert control over their elected representatives. Very briefly, I'm going to run you through it. The aspect of our work that has made us kind of known, at least among the few people in the NGO world and journalism and academia, is the fact that we've created a profile, a digital profile, something like Facebook, if you like, for each member of parliament. In this profile, citizens can monitor the individual member of parliament in terms of his participation in parliament, how active is he, does he pose enough questions, does he actually go there, does he vote, what does he ask questions about, what are the topics, the thematics that he's most interested in, and also one can also see his the financial interest statements of each parliamentarian. We're the only place, if you like, in Greece that has in digital format the financial interest statements of MPs from 2012 up until 2016-15, which are the latest financial interest statements available. And on top of that, and most importantly, citizens can actually send a question digitally to the members of parliament. The question goes through a moderation process. We make sure that we want to create a safe environment for true actual discussion and not what usually goes on in Greece. So citizens can ask questions to MPs, and the MPs gets to answer them. And about 75% of MPs actually use Vuli Watch and answer to questions. When we first started, the numbers were dramatic, but we didn't give up. So these are the profiles of the MPs and the interaction. So we offer the citizens the interaction, the opportunity to interact with their elected representatives, especially young people who use smartphones and the internet all the time. We managed to bridge that gap this way. We also monitor all parliamentary activity and especially the votes that take place in Parliament. We don't only record how each MEP voted in a roll call vote, and in fact we issue the results of the roll call votes before the Greek Parliament does, but we also analyze the vote. We analyze the bill that was voted, article by article, in a way so that anyone could understand. So there's more tools that are available on Vuli Watch. I'm not going to tire with them. You can explain them. You can go online and check it out for yourself. The second aspect of our work, which I think is the most exciting and at least excites me the most, is our activist campaign advocacy perspective. So again, we're trying to promote openness, transparency, citizen engagement through the provision of information. 2 minutes, wow. Okay, I thought we won. Campaign and advocacy work. We focus on a few, three main general thematics. One of them has to do with the transparency in the financials of political parties. Brief example, we monitor the parliamentary committee that's responsible for transparency issues, either the asset declarations of MPs or the political parties. And we noticed a year ago or so, that the report that they issued said that some political parties, we don't know which political parties, misused public grants, we don't know how much, that was directed towards financing research activities, and they misspent it by doing we don't know what. And so on and so forth. So there was an amount of a series of malpractices, if you like. So we were a bit upset by this report because we needed the information. So we started lodging access to information requests. So this is the second part that we campaign for, access to information. It's a constitutional right that we've got in Greece, that we enjoy in Greece, but nobody knows about it and nobody makes use of it. And we lodged a request for Parliament to release this information, which is essential for a democracy. It's essential for building trust. Parliament has repeatedly refused to do so. So so a month ago or so, we became the first entity, as far as I know, that basically lodged an application of annulment against the Greek Parliament in front of the Constitution, in the High Council. I'm missing the Council of State. Exactly, yeah. So we're proud of that. So we're waiting to see what's going on with this aspect. Because I don't have enough time, we also deal a lot with the financial asset declarations of members of Parliament. We not only digitalize them, but we also track problems and we report it to Parliament. And in general, we work a lot on issues that we find that are essential for democracy. Again, transparency, openness, and citizen participation. You can build trust by restoring all these aspects that I mentioned before. You can build trust in a democracy by creating an open and inclusive environment, and this is what we try to do. Sorry if I spoke longer than I should have.
Not, in fact, I saw our audience checking their smartphones, obviously they're checking the labels, the rest will do that when they go home. So thank you very much. And turning to Epaminondas Farmakis on my right, the founder of Human Rights 360. Epaminondas claims to have 20 years of experience in civil society, probably since early childhood. He has allocated $1.1 billion so far to more than 1,300 nonprofits in over 65 countries. There is a giver among the takers. And this is so because some of his previous positions were managing director in Solidarity Now, director in the European Economic Area Norway grants the NGO fund in Greece, the Vodosaki Foundation, president and CEO of the Philanthropic Advisory Unit LPs SA, and chief operations officer at the Stavros Niarchos Foundation. Nevertheless, he has also worked as a financial advisor at Merrill Lynch and has done postgraduate work at the US Senate, the Office of the Minority Leader. He's followed a joint MBA and Master of Science in Financial Services at Georgetown University. He's known for his non-profit management and fundraising skills, I can assure you about that. And while he's a believer in philanthropy, he's eager to introduce new impact-driven products and innovation needed in the sector. For the record, Epaminondas believes in advocacy and communication as a tool for awareness and positive change, and is featured often in Greek and international media. Epaminondas, the floor is yours. Many thanks.
I can assure you I'm not running for any office, either now or in the future. Thank you, Anna, for the most kind introduction, and David for the invitation, both of you. So I will approach a little bit differently the issue at hand. I mean, obviously for us, the answer is a most definite yes, that civil society could be the gatekeeper and should be and is to some extent. And Stefanos and Anna are really very primary examples of how gatekeepers would look like in the national and global level, of course. We at Human Rights 360, we focus on three main areas: integration of vulnerable groups, border monitoring in Evros and other areas, and hate crime as it relates also to the far-right attacks on our society and democracy. One aspect, I mean, you obviously can see all this on our webpage, but a recent research that we brought out to the public last Wednesday is on national identity, immigration and refugees in Greece. One of our donors, the Social Initiative, commissioned it with More in Common. And I'll just tell you two or three, in my opinion, significant items. So 79% of Greeks believe that the traditional parties and politicians do not care about me, about them, which I think is very much along the lines of the previous panel for trust. 77% seem to be very proud that they are Greek, obviously. And we found that 68% believe that there are increasing levels of racism and discrimination in our society. So what does that mean for the civil society? As you know, probably, there are thousands of NGOs in Greece. We had an interesting discussion with Jim last night, and I'm sure we are very eager to listen to him speak a little bit later on the importance of registering NGOs and how that builds trust among society. But there are some also downfalls with registries. We have seen it in many countries like Egypt, obviously China, India, and other places, how they use a form of registry to really suffocate the civil society and to punish civil society organizations. We are in discussions with Anna, as Anna very eloquently said before, of bringing about legislation, or even with Transparency International Greece, setting up a self-guide, let's say, for Greek NGOs on how transparent they are and how they can improve their transparency to the public. But that's not enough, in my opinion. We see an explosion of anger at political elites, thus the rise of a Nazi party here in Greece, the Golden Dawn. We have still a lot of economic dissatisfaction, and we have a lot of anxiety in social change in Greece and globally. And NGOs cannot do, of course, everything, although they very much like to. But some NGOs, like Transparency International and Bully Watch, could serve in the political front as gatekeepers. Some others would work for service provision, as many colleagues here do. Others, like us, could advocate a lot on important issues, for example, giving the right to vote to legal immigrants here in Greece, or Greeks being abroad, the opportunity to vote as well. Something that has been a lot discussed, but isn't really happening, not this time around also. Let me just say also that last year it was the 70th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And we are very proud that more than 200 countries now are listed. But last year was also a terrible year for human rights, as you know, in many countries around the world. Even in Greece, we have seen the unlawful detention of vulnerable groups, of the illegal pushback of refugees back to Turkey without any consideration of their safety. So there is a lot of work to be done. We really believe that each one of us should know very well what the basic human rights are and how to go about to advocate it. It's for each one of us to do that, and collectively to help do that for vulnerable groups. But let me say that our leaders in that are silent. They have failed us globally. I mean, we have seen what is happening now in the United States, in Brazil, in Europe, in many countries. We have seen the chaotic Brexit process being done. Thus, a lot of local populations have a lot of fear of their future, and we cannot really leave to the global technological companies to be the gatekeepers of democracy. I mean, we love technology, but we should all support as much as possible a fair and transparent manner in which we live. However, also the human rights movements across the world have failed, I believe, societies. I mean, we seem to be disconnected with the middle ground in each society. We seem to be thought of being protecting very acrea or very out of the ordinary, let's say, cases. We don't seem to be connected with the middle, let's say, of each society that are fighting really for their survival. There is so much inequality where NGOs could play a big role, in my opinion, of lowering and making society more equal. So some ways to do it is to enforce decision making at the local level. There are already community parliaments, that notion of around the world being developed. Some issues like climate change is a global problem that requires, of course, a global solution and global participation. Some others are more local, but these people movements, I think, which are going to be critical in the future because of climate change or war or conflict or simply economic situations around the world, is a warning sign for us as societies to come together, recognize it, and be the gatekeepers, essentially, of what democracy is about.
Thank you very much.
And tomorrow, if I may, since I'm on time, I will say that David are going to blame you tomorrow for the biggest international conspiracy, publishing your article the same day of the event.
Like a chance. Okay. Last but not least, Olga Dukakis, co-founder για την κοινότητα Μεσολόγγης, who made the effort to come to Athens all the way from Thessaloniki, and so we thank her very much. Olga is a lawyer with a master's degree in European Studies. She's a START Fellow at the Goethe Institute, founded by the Robert Bosch Foundation, working as project director of the Roots, I pronounce it correctly, a project designed to create employment possibilities, transfer local workers' knowledge to youngsters, and appreciate places and landscape elements. She has participated in a variety of trainings on creative communication, cultural management, adult education, participatory planning, and public consultation. And being among the founders of για την κοινότητα Μεσολόγγης, which has started as an independent citizens initiative, is really interesting because they're now involved in local elections, but they still claim to be a non-partisan entity, and Olga is going to explain to us how this is so.
Thank you very much. So I feel a little bit that I represent the Greek countryside because I'm coming here today from Thessaloniki, which is in the west part of Greece. It's the prefecture of Etolokatania. It's a town that has 14,000 people, and the municipality of Thessaloniki has 36,000 people. So I'm coming here today representing the initiative για την κοινότητα Μεσολογγίου, for the community of Thessaloniki. And it's an initiative that it established in August 2018 because in July the new law for the local government passed from the parliament. This new law has an innovation and a new change, and it's about the fact that independent people and independent teams have the possibility to participate in the elections in order to be elected in their communities. And when I say independent, I mean that they can be independent from political parties, but also independent from mayors. Until now, if you wanted to be elected in the board of your community, you should be part of a political party, of the party of a mayor. But right now, for the first time, there is an opportunity for people, of independent people, for communities under 300 people, or independent teams for communities from 300 people and more to participate, not obligated to be part of a political party or a mayor's party. And this is something innovative because it gave the idea to people that participate in cultural initiatives or initiatives of civil society to participate in the elections. Although before, in my community, in Mesologi, all these people, they were very active. They had, let's say, not a fear, but a disgust, and as you said before, a trust issue when it comes to institutions. So they didn't want to cooperate. And sometimes there were also issues of transparency, and that is why right now this change gives them the opportunity to have a voice in the community council. So we see that the law gives the opportunity to disconnect the designation of the governing bodies from the mayor's party and to have freedom to participate. So what we did in Mesologi is that we draw a map of the public life of our community, and we saw that we have very active cultural initiatives. We have very good public servants. We have nice initiatives in the public sector. We have some strong foundations, but all these are misrepresented in the municipality council, but also are misrepresented in the community council. Also, we saw a gap to the fact that the people that were part of the community council were not activated. And let me give you an example. The municipality of Mesologi has 19 communities, and some people that they were elected to run their communities, they were not even living in their villages. So the citizens in the villages, they didn't have a voice in the municipality. And imagine that these villages, they were almost 60 or 70 kilometers away. So there was a problem of connections. And although we're living in 2019, and maybe some people say that we have internet and all this digital information, some municipalities, they do not have the possibility to offer public services online. So in the countryside, people need this connection with their communities. So what we did, we started going to the neighborhoods and we organized public consultations. So we actually activated an article from the law of 2010 that talks about local citizen gatherings in the neighborhoods. I suppose that in the municipality of Athens you have done this because you gave us the example of Kimseli and Syntagma. Unfortunately, in our municipality we never had this experience, but we applied a method which is called World Cafe. So what we actually did, we invite people in a neighborhood gathering, and we asked them to sit not as we sit here right now. We asked them to sit like in a cafe in groups of 4 or 5. We had a moderator, and we posed to them 2 or 3 questions. And these questions, of course, they were about the neighborhood, and then at the end we had some conclusions. And we did a harvesting, as we say, of this collective knowledge. All these people, it was really interesting to see that they have never participated in something like this. At the end, we gave some questionnaires. All of them, they wanted to do it again. The unfortunate thing is that there were very few young people, because few young people live in the countryside. They all live in order to come to Athens or abroad to work. And all of them, they said that the core of the community is their neighborhood. The problems that arose and the problems that they were all talking about was their daily problems, the problems that they face in their daily life. Like, for example, the problem with recycling, with the garbages, with the unguarded dogs in the city, the problems about traffic, about lighting, about the roads. At the beginning of the procedure and at the end, what we did is that we offered them information about the jurisdiction of the community council, about the fact that the community council has one decisive jurisdiction, that it can decide about how it can spend the money that comes from the municipality to the community, how the money should be spent and where, but all the other jurisdictions are advisory. We saw that by doing all these neighborhood gatherings, there was a wave of independent communities that they wanted to participate in the elections, and we are very happy that in our municipalities, 7 other communities decide to participate as independent entities, but also all over Greece, we saw that there are also other cities, like for example Alexandroupolis, that we are also connected in terms of advising each other, that they also run as independent movements and as people coming from the civil society to get a position in the community council. I would like to close by saying that the core of the Greek society is the community, and we saw that the people show trust to their fellow being, and when you give them the chance to participate and talk, they want to participate. It's not only about our mobile phone or internet, it's all about human connection, and citizens want to participate in the decision-making procedure, and they feel that they are outside from all the real issues that taking part in their life, not only because they have information, also because they are not asked, so they feel outside. And all these neighborhood gatherings gave them the possibility to speak. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I open the floor to the audience for your questions, please. I'm sure there will be few. Please, sir.
Hello, my name is Michael, and I'm a Turkish living in Athens since 2 years. My question is this. Given the current situation of the inefficiency of democracy towards the rise of the far right, more and more, and even in Europe, and given the impotence of the system to include all the parties to make a protection against these far right movements, should we really be the gatekeepers of democracy as such, or should we try to redefine or improve the common ground of what we understand from democracy? Thank you.
Addressed to all panelists.
Yeah, please.
Other questions? Yes, please, sir.
Are there any efforts to teach individuals, young people, at a very early age, these concepts? I understand that you are addressing in your work adults, grown-ups, but is there any effort to bring the young ones in the work?
To all panelists again. No third question. No third. Great. Okay, let's start from my left.
I'll start with the second question. Yes, there are some efforts, not systematically from the municipality itself, but some NGOs or other community groups have been doing this very consciously and systematically with children. There is Desmos who is doing it, who is trying to include the notion of volunteerism in Greek school in a way that is merged with the rest of the educational system. And we did, there is in the municipality a sector for the child in which there have been similar efforts. So yes, there are, and there are more than those. Now, but the other question, I'm not exactly sure how to answer that. It's very broad. I think that the rise of the far right and the extreme far right in Athens is not as abrupt and dramatic as it could have been. I'm not saying as it is in other countries, as it could have been under the circumstances of the crisis and what Greece has gone through. I think there is something to say about the slower pace in which this particular populist voice has been able to expand. And yeah, I don't want to explain it. It would be too superficial to say that it is thanks to the civil society efforts or to this bottom-up, genuine connection with the public sphere that some people have. It would be too superficial to explain it that way. But there might be a link or correlation. Attempt number 2.
Yeah, I'll start with your second answer to the first question. I don't like to be called the gatekeeper of democracy because I don't think our role is to gatekeep and protect this democracy. This democracy is, as you know, the various events show that are happening around us is obviously problematic. There is some problem with this democracy, isn't there? I mean, the rise of populism, the rise of extreme movements, the reaction of different cultures and civilizations around the world towards Western democracy as we've built it. So I'm not a gatekeeper of democracy. I believe obviously in democracy, but I believe that democracy should evolve. We live in the 21st century, and we're employing a democracy that was designed, institutionally speaking, in the 1800s, without taking into account technological advancements, societal advancements, economic advancements, and I think that is why democracy is kicking right now and is making a few people unhappy. About the rise of extreme far right wing, etc., and fascism, and Greece in particular, I'm gonna pick up from where Amalia left it. There is one thing I'm proud for being Greek, and that is that, despite the financial crisis, the refugee crisis, and everything else, Golden Dawn is what it is. There's other European countries where they haven't had a single refugee walking in there, or a single I don't know what, and they elect far right wing governments, or they're anti, or their extreme fascist groups are very, very high up. So this is one thing that I'm proud of, and I think it's rooted in our history. We've always fought fascism. Now, we've made huge efforts to transfer our, because part of the reason that we're doing what we're doing is to our main target audience is young people. No offense, but they're the future. I don't think I can change a 70-year-old guy's mind very easily, but I can change maybe a 15-year-old. What we tried to do is we developed a series of school programs, if you like. We went to the Ministry of Education. We had long chats with the then Vice Minister. He was very supportive. We went through the process, which is to apply to the specific body within the Ministry of Education that deals with these issues, and we got rejected. You know why? Because they said that our platform is too dynamic, and the content in the platform changes, and we cannot trust it. So we small parenthesis. A couple of years ago, we got an EU grant, and we started rewatching Cyprus as well. And my colleagues there were we're having a meeting with the Ministry of Education. What should I tell them? And I said, here you go, have my proposal. And it went through. And next summer, in the next academic year, we're going to employ that program. So we're trying, but they won't have us.
same experience, I must say, with Transparency International releases 2 children's books. But fortunately, we're happy that some private schools have accepted us, but it didn't went through the ministry. Yes.
Yes, if I may say, that's a critical question. I mean, the education aspect is the most important, and civil society can play the role of exactly what my colleague said before, of modernizing perhaps the educational system, something that most states or countries are unable or unwilling to do. Yes, for example, the Norwegian Gatekeepers Center will start in September together with the university, the Department of Education, a program in some schools to teach about diversity and kids not to be open to racist ideas, etc., xenophobia. So we can give you some programs, but they are really they are not part of a curriculum that can be in public or private schools, I have to say. Even private schools have flexibility, but they don't introduce this kind of curriculum. I'm talking about high schools, of course. Now, the first question of our friend from Turkey, I think it's more significant. I hear what my colleagues say. I tend a little bit to disagree again, because Golden Dawn is a clear Nazi party, and across Europe there are similar parties, but they are all of them are very opportunistic, and it's a big debate on for example, Vox in Spain, that we never expected Spain to have such a party in the parliament, run on a platform of more bullfights, hunting, etc., etc. So they do capitalize on ideas or lack of leadership or other. You can debate that, what is really the root cause. But it is us that we have, our elected officials and all of us that have allowed this space to be taken over by these parties. And we are too afraid or too tired or with other reasoning, not intervening and taking back that space. And we also, especially in Greece, we make the mistake, I think, of not speaking, not addressing to these 500,000 of Golden Dawn supporters, and just writing them off that they will always belong there. And in fact, in the European elections, we will probably see even double digits for Golden Dawn. On the other hand, democracy works. They are on trial. 69 members, including all their MPs, are on trial. Soon, at the end of the year, we will have the results. Something also very sensitive and challenging for civil society to communicate. A rise in the elections and then probably a conviction, either individually or as a party, needs to be very carefully communicated across society. And I think the civil society has a big role to play there. So yes, I would say that there are a lot of challenges. Democratic institutions do work. I mean, liberal democracy works, but it has to be supported and modernized a lot.
So, about the first question, I would like to tell you that I felt surprised when I saw that from my region there was one member that was elected in the parliament that belonged to the far right. I think that there are no gates in public space, so we should not speak about gatekeepers. We should speak about keepers, and I think that all citizens are keepers of democracy. We should talk about open spaces. And when it comes to extremists and far right, it's a matter of education, and it's a matter of dialogue. It takes time. And I think in Greece, it was a matter of choice to give them space. So it's a matter of choice to discuss how this space not should be taken away, but it's a matter of discussion and it's a matter of education, because some people were raised with this kind of ideas, and it's very difficult. So about the second question, to tell you the truth, I agree with the fact that it's very, very, very difficult to reach the ministry and teach younger generations, but what we did, I will give you an example in Mesologi, is that we took the auspices from the General Secretary of Youth, and then we asked from the directors of the schools to enter the schools, and we organized with them in their classes some participatory activities. So it's a way to overcome this obstacle that the ministry doesn't trust you and consider you very dynamic. And also it's a matter of connection, that the school director knows you, that you come from this region, from this city, and trusts you, and he lets you enter the class. So yes, this is the answer. Thank you.
So thank you very much. So reaching the end of this panel, I think we all agree that we need to strengthen the Greek civil society, because the fight for democracy is tough and long-lasting. No matter how hard civil society fights, the rivals of democracy will always fight back, perhaps even more fiercely. But in an environment of economic austerity like the one in our region, it is our less privileged co-citizens whose human rights are mostly impaired. And this becomes worse if a democratic deficit is also present. The privileged ones will always find a way to go through, and it is those less privileged ones for which we should fight. At the end of the day, it's our own core values for which we should fight. Thank you very much.